What do you get when you mix a volatile, drama-filled band with a desperate manager who would do anything to save his ego and reputation? You get the fake Fleetwood Mac. That's right. There was a band running around playing shows billed as Fleetwood Mac despite one little problem, that none of the members of the actual Fleetwood Mac were in it. Sound unbelievable? Well, stay tuned to find out all about it. Hello and welcome to another episode of If Guitars Could Speak, the documentary series where we examine famous musicians, amazing pieces of gear, and interesting moments from rock history. Today we're going to pull another gem from the files marked Weird when we look at a time in 1974 when Fleetwood Mac's manager went to some pretty extreme measures to keep the US tour going. So extreme that he actually tried to do it without the actual band. Remember though, if you like stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel and be sure to like the video below to let the YouTube algorithm know that other rock fans would like to see it. And with that, let's take a look at the fake Fleetwood Mac. The early 70s were a tumultuous time for Fleetwood Mac. In 1970, founder and spiritual leader Peter Green had left the group, leaving a huge void at the front of the stage. Guitarists Jeremy Spencer and Danny Kirwan tried to fill his shoes initially, but Spencer would also leave in 71 when he decided to join the religious cult known as The Family, and he moved to America to pursue his spiritual awakening. The band got so desperate that they would eventually beg Peter Green to briefly rejoin in Spencer's absence, and the ever-accommodating Green would help the Mac out for a while they searched for a new guitarist. Now that search would eventually end with Bob Welch after the band heard a recording of his songs. But Danny Kirwan would go on composing a lion's share of the band's material over their next two albums, Future Games and Bare Trees. But Kirwan would start to hit the alcohol hard, and he started to drift away from the rest of the band, becoming angry and withdrawn. Kirwan eventually would smash his Gibson Les Paul Custom before a show in 72, and started to rail against the other members of the band, and so Mick Fleetwood just fired Kirwan, feeling that the pressure of the band had gotten to him and that he'd had a breakdown. So the band was again forced to find a guitarist, and they would hire Bob Weston and vocalist Dave Walker, but Walker would only last one album, Penguin. They would then gain a little bit of traction with the strong 73 effort Mystery to Me, which contained Bob Welch's song Hypnotized. The song received moderate airplay and pushed the album up to gold status, but the Mac's internal drama would come to a head with John and Christine McVie's marriage forming cracks due to John's alcoholism. Bob Weston had an affair with Mick Fleetwood's wife, Jenny Boyd Fleetwood, sister of Pattie Boyd, who was married to George Harrison and then later to Eric Clapton, and Mick was just devastated by the betrayal. And with virtually every band member undergoing some form of marital or relationship drama, the tour turned into a war of attrition, and the magic had just gone. So Mick announced to the roadies and the staff after a show on October 20th, 1973 in Lincoln, Nebraska, that Fleetwood Mac was splitting up and the 73 US tour was over. But the band's manager had other ideas. Clifford Davis, who had changed his name from Clifford Adams to avoid confusion with the Cliff Adams Singers, had originally worked with Beatles manager Brian Epstein before joining the management group that initially would go on to take on the fledgling Fleetwood Mac in 1967. The story goes that Peter Green came to the office one day to complain to the management that it wasn't doing enough to promote the band's new single, Black Magic Woman. Davis was so impressed by Green's toughness and realness, with both of them being from East End Cockney, and after they talked for a while, Green asked Davis to just be their manager going forward. Davis was just knocked out by the group, and he pledged Green at the time to do everything he could for them. But Davis would get wrung through the ringer as Fleetwood Mac wildly shifted between members and styles, and all of this came to a head when the band split in the middle of the 1973 tour, and he was livid. He wrote a letter to the band informing him that he owned the name Fleetwood Mac and that he hadn't slaved for years to be brought down by the whims of irresponsible musicians. He decided to take matters into his own hands by assembling a totally different group of musicians that he would call the New Fleetwood Mac. Dave Todd, also known as Elmer Gantry, would be lead singer. Kirby Gregory from another of Davis's acts called Curved Air would be the lead guitarist. Paul Martinez of the Downliners sect was tapped to play bass. John Wilkinson would play keyboards, and on the skins was Manfred Mann Chapter 3 alumni Craig Collins. Because Clifford Davis' side of the story has never really been fully explored, the reports of what exactly he told this band is not fully known, but some sources have said that they were told that the original Fleetwood Mac had broken up and that eventually Mick Fleetwood and Christine McVie would join the new band on the tour. But in 2017, Gantry and Gregory did an interview for the BBC where they reported that Fleetwood actually came to their house and spoke to them at length about the new band, told them that he would be joining them for the tour, and even approved the set list that the band would rehearse of Mac standards. But of course, Mick Fleetwood denies that this ever happened. He claims that he and the rest of the band found out about this faux collection of musicians from the papers. So who the heck knows who to believe? Once drugs, bad memories, and legal fights get going, it can really be hard to ascertain the real truth. But whatever the origins of the band, they began to play shows as Fleetwood Mac in January of 1974. The promoter of the first show in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a guy named Rich Engler, remembers seeing the band show up and asking, "Where's Fleetwood Mac?" Clifford Davis insisted that this group was the band, but Engler refused to let them go on because he knew they weren't the real Fleetwood Mac because he'd seen them. A scuffle ensued. Davis took a swing at him, and after a brief argument, Engler finally just said, "Whatever," and he let the band take the stage. Surprisingly, however, Engler would go on to say that the band was actually really good, and that the crowd was mostly receptive. Engler did report that a few hardcore Mac fans recognized the deception and demanded a refund, which he did provide. But any hope that Davis had of continuing the charade would fade quickly, and it would all be downhill from there. On January 26th, the band would play at New York City's Academy of Music, and a New York Times music writer would comment that Fleetwood Mac has completely changed personnel since its last New York visit. Gantry lost his voice for the show and forced the band to have to perform jams and blues instrumentals. It's unclear how many more shows the fake Fleetwood Mac would play, but the jig was up, and as the word got around, most hardcore Fleetwood Mac fans were starting to demand refunds. By the end of February, there were no more tour dates with the group scheduled. Meanwhile, the real Fleetwood Mac was back in England, trying to decide what to do about the situation. Bob Welsh suggested that the band should just move to the US since that was where the courts were involved and they would temporarily relocate to California. Of course, this temporary arrangement would eventually become a permanent one. It would take years of legal wrangling in both the US and the UK, but eventually the British courts would rule that the terms of Davis's contract was manifestly unfair, and the band would be released to manage themselves from then on. The real Fleetwood Mac would then go on to perform 44 dates in late 1974, culminating in the aptly titled bootleg record from the live shows called "Will the Real Fleetwood Mac Please Stand Up?" Unfortunately, though, Welsh would leave after the tour to go solo, and the band would find themselves on the lookout for a completely new musical direction. Mick Fleetwood ended up at Sound City Studios, the legendary Sound City in Los Angeles, and struck up a conversation with the engineer Keith Olsen. And he played a track from a new album by two unknown singer-songwriters named Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. Coincidentally, Buckingham was at Sound Studio recording demos that same day, and him and Fleetwood were introduced, and I think everyone knows what happened over the next few years. Maybe the biggest selling album of 1977 called Rumors, does that ring a bell? But whatever happened to the fake Mac, however? Well, even though the traumatic tour nearly broke them, they recognized chemistry, and they actually formed a band called Stretch and had mild success with the single "Why Did You Do It?" But some members would leave after differences over the band's direction. Stretch would actually continue with Elmer Gantry and Kirby Gregory, most recently releasing an album in 2011. In the end, Fleetwood Mac's upheaval and move to the US would lead to their most successful period as a band, with the masterpiece Rumors being released to great fanfare in 1977. But the moment when a completely different band took the stage under the nameplate Fleetwood Mac in 1974 wasn't just one of the strangest moments in the band's history, it was probably one of the weirdest in rock history. Thanks for watching yet another episode of If Guitars Could Speak. Remember, hit that like button below if you liked the video. Be sure to subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel because there's a lot more content like this where it came from. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.